Win big in 2024 with RotoBaller.com's MLB Premium Pass. It includes our preseason draft kit, 15 exclusive lineup tools, and the Team Sync platform. Get customized rankings for your specific league format. Sync your leagues with Team Sync and use our new live draft assistant. Then get customized advice for your scoring settings. Get a discount for any MLB Premium Pass using my promo code Knuckler. Just visit RotoBaller.com, sign up today, and start rotoballing like a boss. This podcast is also brought to you by Parlay Play Fantasy Sports. Use my referral code RotoBrady. Get that sweet, sweet deposit bonus. They got free contests. They got paid contests coming to a state near you. Check out Parlay Play Fantasy Sports. Very fun and unique platform. They're giving out boosts all the time. And what is up, everybody? This is Brady Grove bringing you episode 130 of RotoBaller's official MMA podcast, Tap That. And we are looking forward to UFC Atlantic City this Saturday.
Break out the red panties.
Going down at Boardwalk Hall in the AC at 7 p.m. on Saturday. That means I will be in the RotoBaller MMA Discord from 5 p.m. and onward on Saturday evening, doing the weekly DFS/sports betting Q&A. So show up to the Discord. Let's talk about this card. Follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. That's where I make picks for all major MMA promotions, regional promotions, things on UFC Fight Pass, major boxing events. On Twitter at RotoBrady. And then follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast. Like, subscribe, leave favorable reviews, comments, tell your friends at Tap That MMA Podcast on Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify. This weekend, and this week, first off, we got some Russian MMA on Friday morning. We got 2 boxing events. I know the bigger one on Saturday when you got the WBOBC World Super Welterweight title between the Soul Taker and Sebastian Fundora. So that's Arislandi Lara fights on that card as well. Julio Cesar Martinez, that's a fun one. LFA 180 on UFC Fight Pass, Cage Warriors this weekend. It's spread out pretty well. It's not as rich as the last week was, but there will be mixed martial arts and boxing this weekend, and then we get into more PFL the week after that. There are 14 fights on this card, starting with Angel Pacheco and Kellen Lufrin at bantamweight. 185 pounds, Andre Petrosky, the Ultimate Fighter veteran, trying to pick it up for everybody against Jacob Malkoun. Melissa Gatto against Victoria Dudakova at flyweight. Light heavyweight between Ibo Aslan and Anton Turkalej. Featherweight, Connor Matthews and Dennis Bajuka. Featherweight, Julio Arce and Herbert Burns back in there. Strawweight, Virna Jandiroba and Lupita Godinez. Featherweight, Nate Landwehr against Jamal Emmers. Chidi Njokuani at welterweight against Reese McKee back in the octagon. Featherweight, Bill Algeo and Kyle Nelson. Middleweight, Nursultan Ruziboev. Probably Ruzibov. There we go. I'm going with Ruzibov as the pronunciation. And Cedric Dumas, a guy that he's still in the UFC, and it's not even that crazy because he's 9-1 despite some of these performances. Middleweight, Bruno Silva and Chris Weidman.
Don't do this. You cannot do this,
We'll get to that in a little bit. Vicente Luque in a welterweight co-main event against Joaquin Buckley and Aaron Blanchfield. Or as the banner at the press conference today said, Aaron Blanchfield. They forgot the F. And Manon Furio, the 11-1 flyweight prospect. Let's start off with Angel Pacheco and Kellen Lofgren. Pacheco 7-2 as a professional, 32 years old. He will be the plus 300 underdog. Lofgren, the minus 380 favorite. Pacheco 4 wins by knockout, 3 by submission, 0 wins by decision. He hasn't won since August of 2022 when he got a rear naked choke against Vilsan Nedruzhny at Cage Fury 112. And that was a 5-2 opponent. His 2 opponents before that were 9-14 and 9-13. Before losing on the Contender Series September of last year by unanimous decision to Danny Silva. Not an overly impressive professional resume coming into this one, comparably, 27-year-old Callum Loughran out of Tyrone, Ireland, fighting for Team Coban Liverpool. That just sounds cool. Sounds like a strong group of European fighters. He is coming off a unanimous decision loss to Taylor Lapalus, September 2023. I recall that being a pretty solid performance there by Lapalus. But he did come in from Cage Fury, and his last 3 opponents, their records added up to 24-3. He came in as the Cage Warriors bantamweight champion, having claimed that vacant belt. All but one of his professional wins has been inside the distance. That decision came back in July of 2021 against Hussein Abbaszadeh. He's finished his last 3 opponents, all in Cage Warriors, all with winning records and 5 or more professional fights. It's just like, why would I not? I was more impressed with Loughran with what he did in Cage Warriors before he came to the UFC than I was with anything Angel Pacheco's done. And Lapalus really looked fantastic, I thought, against Callum Loughran. It's very hard to hold that loss against him. So I won't, because I don't think Angel Pacheco is that respectable of opponent for Callum Loughran. Loughran's the one with the upward trajectory at 27 years old. So, Pacheco!
Don't do this. You cannot do this,
And even though Angel Pacheco has yet to lose a fight in his pro career, in a way other than decision, this is a situation where I think Loughran wins probably 80 to 85 of these fights out of 100. And I'm going Loughran inside the distance, minus 135. Hit that. And I can definitely see Loughran being in my DFS lineup this week. I think that he's, depending on that price range, I think that he's a guy that you're going to want to be looking at for that finishing potential. Next up, we got a middleweight matchup between Andre Petroski and Jacob Malkoun. Petroski is the plus 185 underdog. Ooh, that's how I like it with Andre Petroski. And Jacob Malkoun, the minus 225 favorite. Let's start off talking about Jacob Malkoun. Malkoun, loser of 2 of his last 3 against Cody Brundage, where he got DQ'd. A fight that he was, winning 28-2 in the striking. They each had a takedown at that point. There was a strike to the back of the head, is why that one was a DQ. So that was a rough one. But what are you going to do? Nick Maximov, he beat by unanimous decision with 9 takedowns. Hell, he lost to Brendan Allen by unanimous decision, getting outstruck 45-33, even though he landed 7 takedowns to Brendan Allen's 2. His wins in the UFC are Abdul Razak Al Hassan and AJ Dobson and Nick Maximov, where he has landed a combined 23 takedowns in that stretch, and he only needed to land 27 strikes against Abdul Razak Al Hassan, but he landed a combined 163 against Maximov and Dodson. Petroski, he is 4 years older. They each have a 73-inch reach. Petroski, by way of the Ultimate Fighter, he lost in the semifinals of that season, but he beat Michael Gilmore with a 3rd-round TKO in a fight he was thoroughly winning in the Ultimate Fighter finale, August of 2021. And then, it was a great run for Andre Petroski. This is a guy that I feel like we got a great value on as an underdog several different times. He had 2 straight submission victories against Hu Yaozong and Nick Maximov, an arm triangle choke and an anaconda choke. And, MMA math doesn't matter, but it's always interesting when 2 fighters have a common opponent and a common win, this being Nick Maximov. Then it was 2 straight decision victories where he landed a combined 99 strikes and 10 takedowns against Wellington Turman and Gerald Mearshart. He is coming off a loss by very, very quick and early and brutal first-round knockout by Michel Pereira. He landed 6 strikes. Petrosky didn't get off any offense. Did not record a single statistic. That was how quick and brutal it was. I do think it is important against a guy like Jacob Malkoun. I think it is important, is Petrosky, Malkoun has been able to ride a lot of takedowns to a lot of these different victories. Petrosky had 8 takedowns against Wellington Turman. I think Andre Petrosky is the better wrestler. I think that Jacob Malkoun is, I think that he's the one that's more likely to land the more effective shots on the feet. But I do think that Andre Petrosky can at least hold his own there against Jacob Malkoun. And I think that he's probably, the stronger dude. And I think that he can control Jacob Malkoun through the course of this one and control the fight on the ground. And if Jacob Malkoun isn't able to get Andre Petrosky to the ground, he's going to have to win it on the edge of his striking alone. And I think that Andre Petrosky has the tools to win this, 50% of the time here. Plus 185. Give it to me. I think Petrosky wins 50 of these out of 100. I'm not, even with that quick knockout lot where I was kind of saying, similar things about Andre Petrosky, about Michel Pereira. And I think Jacob Malkoun, I wouldn't be shocked if he won this by decision. I think that, I think that this fight goes the distance probably. That's actually just minus 165. I think that's a pretty solid value. Petrosky by decision is plus 500. And Malkoun by decision, that is plus 100. I think that those are both really solid numbers. And I love Andre Petrosky. I'm not yet ready to say that Andre Petrosky can't get a win of this quality just because of the way the Michel Pereira fight ended. Next up, we got a women's flyweight matchup between Victoria Dudakova and Melissa Gatto. Gatto is the minus 155 favorite. Dudakova the plus 130 underdog. Let's start with Victoria Dudakova. 3 straight wins at the UFC level, counting the Contender Series. That was a unanimous decision win where she only landed 19 strikes but 4 takedowns. And then 2 wins at the real UFC level with a first-round knockout over Estela Nunes and a unanimous decision victory most recently, October of last year against Jinyu Frey, outstriking her 74-47 with a knockdown. And she was born in 1999, not to be slept on. She is young and on her way up. But so is Melissa Gatto, born in 1996. The problem is, if you would have asked me even one fight ago for Melissa Gatto, I'd probably say that, the loss, but now, because she's fought good fighters, she fought Victoria Leonardo at UFC 265, knocked her out in the second round. I'm saying, for an entry level of competition, these are definitely 4 recognizable names because she rattled off 2 straight wins, with the next one being a third round knockout against Sijara Eubanks. Now it's been 2 straight losses by decision to Tracy Cortez and Ariane Lipski. Because that was a split decision against Lipski. And so it's like these have been 2 straight losses to better competition, and both on the judges' scorecard. So this is a tougher one, actually. I actually think that this fight could end up being, especially the way that Melissa Gatto's last couple of fights have gone. I actually do, and the way that Dudakova's have gone. I think that this could be a really, really close fight. And so, I think that the Jinyu Frey win at least tells us that Dudakova has, a legitimate shot here. The way that she beat her as well. But Gatto, was so close. I mean, there's a universe, by very slim margins that Melissa Gatto is coming in on a 4-fight winning streak. I think that she deserves to be the favorite here because of her very, her solid performances against Tracy Cortez and Ariane Lipski. So I probably think Gatto at least outstrikes Dudakova, in terms of volume and just wins the overall mixed martial arts fight. if she needs to get takedowns, I think that she's going to be more able to do that than Dudikova. It hasn't been something that Dudikova's had to lean on, but she has been able to get takedown just, in smaller numbers and against lesser competition. So I do think Gatto probably wins this fight like 65 times out of 100. Minus 155, I think, is fine. Dudikova, keep an eye on that one, because if that moves upward, then, think about it more and more. I just think that this is a close fight. I think like Gatto by decision plus 175 makes sense. Dudikova by decision plus 215 makes sense. But this is one that I'd be worried about, where I don't feel as good about it, because I also think that these two fighters have the ability to finish each other too. So method of victory, I'm not super confident, and really Gatto minus 155 is kind of on the fence for me. Next up, we got a light heavyweight matchup between Ibo Aslan and Anton Turkalej. Ibo Aslan is the minus 130 favorite. Turkalej the plus 105 underdog. Start with Anton Turkalej. Came into the UFC through the Contender Series July 2022 with a unanimous decision victory, including 11 takedowns against Asasia dos Santos. Now it's been 3 straight losses. I'll forgive him for the first 2 because he got rear naked choked by Jelton Almeida September 2022 at UFC 279. He lost by unanimous decision to Vitor Petrino in what was a close fight. Got outstruck 39-33 and out taken down 7-5. And then last time out, September of 2023, gets knocked out in the first round by Tyson Pedro. Anton Turkalej, the pleasure man, with a 78-inch reach, born in June 1996. Ibo Aslan, coming off a first-round knockout victory against Paulo Renato Jr., outstruck him 21-8, put the fight away early. Before that, Ibo Aslan, who is a native of Turkey, shout out to all those Turkish fighters, including Ilyas Mamadaliev, fighting out of Istanbul, 27 years old. He came in through Vendetta fights before the Contender Series and Sparta Championship fighting. Slightly recognizable organizations. As you would predict, all 12 of his professional wins are by knockout. So, I do think that Ibo Aslan deserves the credit of, he looked even, Turkalej landing 11 takedowns in the Contender Series. That's one where it's how the Contender Series goes. Sometimes if you're able to get one takedown against an opponent because it's, so overmatched, you're able to get 11. Ibo Aslan finishing his opponent so quickly and continuing his string of knockout victories, legitimizing his professional resume beforehand. Not only that, these two have fought before in Brave CF. Back in August of 2020, Ibo Aslan won by rear naked... No, he beat Ibo Aslan by rear naked choke. I think that this could be... I think that you're getting Aslan at a weird number, being the favorite after, losing the first fight originally and they both being 27 years old. But that was kind of, that was a long time ago. And especially for Aslan, it seems like he's gotten to good work lately. But now that I look at it too, he beat a solid opponent, Renato Jr., in the Contender Series. His professional resume before that wasn't he fought 3 straight opponents with losing records. Turkalej, at least you can say that the opponents that he had to fight over his losing streak, were a solid 3 names. So, honestly, I think I opt for Turkalej again in this one. I think that, inside the distance probably makes the most sense, even though, Turkalej's last win was by decision that was still, years ago. It's crazy to get Turkalej plus money. So I think that he wins 55-60 of these out of 100. I'm really not sold on Ibo Aslan now that I look at it. If he wins this one and he continues to get knockouts, it changes the story on him completely. Then he's here. But until I see this against a fighter at the UFC level who's also won a fight on the Contender Series, and has beaten him before, then I would be very sold that he at least deserves to hang around. Turklish wins this fight 55 to 60 times out of 100. Plus 105. Hit it! But yeah, I wonder what is driving that line, because that's an unusual thing to see. With Turklish having won the first one. But, outcome-wise, by the way, I think, inside the distance, too. Now I got to scroll back up to that. Turklish inside the distance, plus 180. I think that's a good number. I think that you could just go ahead and do plus 105. It's a different element with these two having fought before. So I'm more comfortable with that money line play. Next up, we got a featherweight matchup between Dennis Buzukja and Connor Matthews. Connor Matthews is the plus 102 underdog. Buzukja the minus 122 favorite. Let's start off with Dennis Buzukja. 1-3 in the UFC, and that's with 2 Contender Series fights, because he lost to Melzik Bagdasaryan his first time on the Contender Series, September of 2020. Then he got back into the UFC picture with a unanimous decision victory over Caleo Romero back in July of 2022. And now he's lost 2 straight. Now that at the real UFC level, both in 2023 against the likes of Sean Woodson by unanimous decision, outstruck 71-42 and taken down 4-0. Then he got knocked out early in the first round by Jamal Emmers at UFC 295. Buzukja the Great is his nickname, born in 1997 with a 70-inch reach. Matthews will have a 1-inch reach advantage. He was born in 1992. He's coming in through the Contender Series as well after losing the first one, getting outstruck 110-74, taking down 6-0, and then gets a Contender Series victory, outstriking Jair Farias 80-57 with 7 takedowns in his own right. I mean, ultimately, I guess, what do? You say, who was more impressive on the Contender Series when they got their win in this stretch? At least Matthews, it seemed like won by a bigger margin, statistically, and the way the fights actually played out. He was statistically more significant for DFS purposes if you want to take a real wild card in this situation. And, Connor Matthews, before this most recent Contender Series win, he's 7-1 as a professional. He was in CES, the New England organization, and Cage Titans. I trust that. It's just also, his opponent's combined record before his Francis Marshall fight was 16-99, the last 2 of them. So I don't exactly know how much that means. I don't know. I think Buzukja's had plenty of opportunities to show that he belongs at the UFC level. And even though the 2 opponents that beat him, since his win in the Contender Series are solid opponents, I think that, you defer to the guy in Connor Matthews, who I think was more impressive in the Contender Series and, hasn't now lost 2 straight at this level. I think you opt for the guy that hasn't yet shown that he doesn't belong at a certain level. Give me Connor Matthews plus 102. I think this is about a 50-50 fight, but I think, if anybody, I maybe favor Connor Matthews to win 55 of these out of 100. I don't know. It's weird, too, when you didn't get to see a whole lot of Buzukja against Jamal Emmers. Plus 102, and then, probably, I'd say by decision, I'd say that this fight ends up going the distance. That's minus 135, and Matthews by decision is plus 250. Next up, we've got another featherweight matchup between Julio Arce and Herbert Burns. Herbert Burns, the plus 295 underdog. Arce, the minus 375 favorite. Let's start with Julio Arce, because I know people are talking about Herbert Burns as just a piece of intrigue this week. Arce has gone loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, dating back to November of 2018. So, just off that logic alone, history tells us that he should be able to bounce back here. It's not as simple as that, but, win over Julian Erosa, May of 2019, second round knockout against Andre Ewell. Mr. Highlight, been on this podcast. Shout out to Mr. Highlight. Losses to Hakeem Dawodu and Song Yadong in that stretch. His last win was against Daniel Santos, April of 2022, by unanimous decision, landing 127 strikes. And now he's coming off a loss to Montel Jackson by unanimous decision. He got outstruck 48-26 and knocked down ones in the course of that one. Born in 1989. Herbert Burns, born in 1988. The Blaze.
Break out the red panties.
Entered the UFC with 3 straight wins against Derek Minner in the Contender Series with a submission. He knocked out Nate Landwehr, and then he subbed Evan Dunham, long time veteran of lightweight, Evan Dunham. And it seemed like everything was, moving very fast upward for him. That's, there's name recognition with each of those 3 fighters. And then it's been 2 straight losses. And the lack of activity is, the hardest thing moving forward with Herbert Burns. Knocked out in the second round against Daniel Pineda in August of 2020. That was now 2 fights ago in the UFC for him. And knocked out in the second round by Bill Algeo, July of 2022 in his return. That seems to speak like, I think Arce is well versed to be able to win this fight with a knockout. I think that, obviously the activity level for Herbert Burns is concerning, and it's been a long time since he's won. And Julio Arce, even he didn't fight in all of 2023. Both these guys are getting back into it. But it's, at least Arce with a win over Andre Ewell in that stretch of time, dating back to 2021. The 2 last opponents to beat him are both, very solid, Montel Jackson and Song Yadong. It's kind of in the same for Herbert Burns, too. I just think that, there's way too many question marks to trust Herbert Burns. But, that's the thing. Arce by TKO knockout, that's plus 110. And I do think that he wins this fight, 80 times out of 100. So plus 110 with that method of victory. He hit it! And here's the other thing, too, though. It's not like Arce, he didn't fight all of 2023. And so I do think that, this is, probably within closer reach to Herbert Burns than he's handicapped at. So, even, I do think that there is a universe where, 20 is the floor for him out of 100. And I think it could be high as what? I don't know, 40? I like Arce by TKO knockout, but Herbert Burns plus 295. If I just misquoted that, it's plus 295. I don't know. I think that there's enough question marks here between the both of them for plus 295 to make sense as a flyer. Next up, we've got a women's strawweight matchup. Hey, UFC stats, there's only women's strawweight in the UFC, so you don't need to preface it. Virna Jandiroba and Lupi Godinez. Lupi Godinez is the minus 218 favorite. Jandiroba the plus 195 underdog. Let's start off with Jandiroba. It doesn't seem like it, but she's won 3 of her last 4. Dating back to June of 2021 against Kanaka Murata, she won by second round knockout. Her only loss in that stretch of time is to Amanda Ribas by unanimous decision. She did land a knockdown in that fight too, but she got outstruck 88-50 throughout the course of the fight. Wins a unanimous decision over Angela Hill despite only landing 14 strikes. She rode 3 takedowns to that one. And then unanimous decision victory against Marina Rodriguez, who outstruck her 33-27. But again, Virna rode the 3 takedowns to the win on the judges' scorecard. The only other losses in her UFC career, her 3 UFC losses in her UFC debut to Carla Esparza. My God. Then Mackenzie Dern and Amanda Ribas. Lupi Godinez, riding 4 straight wins and 6 wins out of her last 7. Wins over Loma Lubunme. Ariana Carnolosi by unanimous decision. Cynthia Calvillo and Emily Ducote by decision. The one against Calvillo was a split decision where she did get outstruck 104-87. Then she gets a rear naked choke victory against Elise Reed, September of 2023, and she's coming off a split decision win over Tabitha Ritchie at UFC 295. Interestingly enough, I do think Lupi's 3 losses in the UFC are definitely of a lower quality. One being Angela Hill, who her opponent Virna Jandiroba has beaten, pretty recently. But that was a really close loss that, that's one where if you look at the overall picture of the fight as opposed to round by round, you might have said that Lupi won because she did outstrike Angela Hill 92-85. The other loss was to Luana Carolina and Jessica Panay. But, I think that stylistically, this might end up being a bad matchup for Virna Jandiroba. If it's going to be on the feet, then I think that that's the advantage for Lupi Godinez. In volume and in the damage that her strikes do, I think on the feet, Lupi definitely has the advantage. And then you look at Virna Jandiroba, who I think is just not going to be well apt to, keeping up with Lupi on the feet. And I think that this is a matchup where I don't think she's going to be able to get Lupi Godinez to the ground. And so if you can't do that and you can't ride your 3 takedowns to a decision victory despite your low striking output, that's a problem for Virna Jandiroba. This fight goes the distance. I'm sure that is not a great number. Fight goes to decision, minus 280. I'm very comfortable with that. I think Lupi Godinez wins this fight like 70 to 75 times out of 100. So I don't like a straight-up victor here on the money line, really. And this number moved because I think it even started off at like minus 188. Lupi by decision, minus 135. Hit it. Ow! And if you're going Virna, I think you go plus 350 by decision as well. But Lupi by decision, that's one of my favorite bets so far of the card. Next up, we got a featherweight matchup once again between Nate Landwehr and Jamal Emmers. Nate Landwehr is the plus 154 underdog. Jamal Emmers the minus 185 favorite. I wish I had like a banjo sound drop for Nate Landwehr. Let's start off with Nate Landwehr. Winner of 3 of his last 4. And 4 of his last 6. But he is coming off of a loss. We'll get to that in a second. His first win in the UFC. It's weird because he started off 1-2 with losses to Herbert Burns and Julian Erosa. But he got a unanimous decision victory over Darren Elkins in what was a barn burner back May of 2020. He landed 118 strikes en route to that. Gets that Anaconda choke against Ludwig Klein. UFC Fight Night, Aspen Ladd versus Norma Dumont. Majority decision victory over David Onama in what was also one of the craziest fights I've ever seen back in August of 2022. Gets a rear naked choke against Austin Lingo March of last year, and now he's coming off the unanimous decision loss to Dan Ige, where he was just outclassed on the feet, 88-74, and knocked down once in that one. Jamal Emmers, born in 1989, he will have a 2-inch reach advantage over Nate Landwehr. And, a lot more losing for Jamal Emmers in the UFC. A loss to Julian Erosa in the Contender Series. Then he gets on fighting Giga Chikadze. March of 2020, loses by split decision. His win against Vince Cachero, he did land 103 strikes and 5 takedowns. That was a solid statistical performance. Loses again to Pat Sabatini, that first-round heel hook. Bounces back, unanimous decision win over Hussein Askabov. February of last year. He did fight 3 times last year and went 2-1. Split decision loss to Jack Jenkins June of last year, and then a first-round knockout over Denis Bajuka November of 2023. A lot of common opponents here between the featherweights, especially at UFC Atlantic City. Why would I count against? Why would I count against Nate Landwehr in this one? I don't understand. Nate Landwehr has, maybe it wasn't the same. that would be giving a lot of credit to Jack Jenkins and Pat Sabatini to say that it's the same level of competition that they've, taken their losses to. I mean, Nate Landwehr, with that 3-fight winning streak, he was, he became a fan favorite in the process. People love that guy. I think that he's like a little too savvy and just a little too wild and a little too high volume and fast paced for Jamal Emmers. I think that it'll quickly overwhelm Jamal Emmers. And, Emmers, I think, especially against Pat Sabatini, we see that he can get caught and is susceptible to that. And there's just nothing in Jamal Emmers' career that shows me that, he's ready for that. He's won when he's needed to stick around in the UFC. But Nate Landwehr is, there's a reason he got the Dan Ige fight, because that's a fight people wanted to see, and it was competitive. Even though he ended up losing that, pretty decisively. So you're telling me I can get Nate Landwehr plus 154? I think he wins this fight 60 times out of 100? Slap it! I don't know how he gets it done, honestly. Like, that's the beauty of a Nate Landwehr fight. I think that, he's going to be very opportunistic and aggressive with the opportunities that he gets. Landwehr by submission, maybe, plus 1,000? What? Landwehr inside the distance, plus 350? I like those. Plus 1,000 by submission. Put something in the rainy day jar, and that one you'll be happier, and that jar will be a little bit more full by the end of Saturday night, maybe. Next up, we got a welterweight matchup between Chidi Njokuani and Reese McKee. Reese McKee is the plus 120 underdog. Chidi is the minus 142 favorite. Let's start with Chidi Njokuani. Came into the UFC with a 3-fight winning streak, including the Contender Series, all knockouts, 2 in the first round against Marc-Andre Barriault and Dusko Todorovic. That is really impressive, and that already takes us up to May of 2022. What went wrong? Loses in the second round, gets knocked out by RoboCop Gregory Rodriguez, September of 2022. Split decision loss to Albert Duraev, and then a first-round knockout loss to Michael Alexajuk. So things went wrong quickly for Chidi Njokuani. He's got an 80-inch reach, born in 1988. Reese McKee, born 7 years later. He has lost all 3 of his fights at the UFC level and really got thoroughly beaten. So in his UFC debut, he gets outstruck 40-0 and taken down once, finished in the first round by one Khamzat Chimaev. It was just announced that he's fighting Robert Whittaker coming up. So that's going to be a gigantic event. I think that's headlining a fight night. Awesome. Is it in Sao Paulo? I believe that is the case. 2 decision losses then to Alex Morono. That was a firefight, but ultimately he was 50 strikes shy of Alex Morono's total and 3 takedowns short. That's why he lost, decisively on the judges' scorecards there. Although that was already November of 2020. God, it seems like yesterday. And Angel Lusa, 3 years later. I can't believe that it was 3 years later that his UFC fights came in between, and he was in Cage Warriors in between that. And by the way, he's still 13-5-1 as a pro, and had 3 Cage Warriors wins in between his UFC opportunities. But, we just saw what happened with Ane Lusa against Brian Battle. Not being able to finish that fight, how that one was going not well for him. But Lusa worked Reese McKee 98-77 in the striking, 6 takedowns to 0. Reese McKee had opportunities. And even still to the Barriault win for Chidi and the Dusko win, by first round knockout, what was, barely 2 years ago. And that's how, and Reese McKee went a year longer than, how long it was ago for Chidi in between his UFC fights. I think that, this is where Chidi Njokuani snaps the losing streak. I don't think that the losses to Alexajuk or Duraev mean that he can't beat Reese McKee. But Reese McKee has had his opportunity. I won't blame him for the Khamzat loss. and Morono was going to be a firefight, but I think you maybe had to show a little bit more against the likes of Lusa. And it's like, you want to, throw volumes of strikes with Chidi and Njokuani, your chin will be tested. And, McKee, I think that he's going to want to engage, and I think that he's going to get hit hard. So I think Chidi wins this fight like 65 times out of 100. I think Chidi by TKO knockout plus 120. That's probably my favorite prop, and I could see, especially if he's in the medium price range, 15 to 16, I could see using him in DFS. Anyway, hit it. But Reese McKee.
Nick, one comment, man. One comment.
No, don't be scared, homie. Come on.
With all the shots that you've gotten, there's nothing to lose here. Chidi and Njokuani is a guy in kind of desperate times, too. This is the makings of a potentially great fight. And I think that if you're going Reese McKee, too, I think that you say that it's by TKO knockout as well. That number's plus 215. Not bad at all. This fight doesn't go to decision. That's minus 550. Next up, we got a featherweight matchup between Bill Algeo and Kyle Nelson. Kyle Nelson is the plus 200 underdog. Algeo the minus 245 favorite. Let's start off with the underdog, Kyle Nelson. Kyle Nelson, winner of 2 fights in a row now. And hasn't lost since July of 2022 because he had that draw against Doo-Ho Choi at UFC Fight Night Lewis vs. Spivak because he landed 5 takedowns, and that was ultimately what forced the majority draw. But wait, was there a point taken in that one? Yeah, because it was 29-27 and 28-28 on 2 judges' scorecards. Blake Bilder was his next one by unanimous decision. He outstruck him 59-45. I think Blake Bilder, even when, he could lose 5 more times in the UFC, but if he was still around this age range, I'd say, I still think that he has a decent shot. He's not a bad fighter. And then it bounces back, or gets a second win in a row against Fernando Padilla, who we just saw get the win this past weekend against Luis Pajuelo by a first-round Darce choke. So Kyle Nelson on a nice little winning streak. There was just, it's mostly been mostly losses against Jai Herbert, Billy Quarantillo, Matt Sales, and Diego Ferreira. Those 2 last ones that I mentioned were back in 2019 and 18. Bill Algeo, born in 1989. This guy has won 4 of his last 5 fights. And a win against Spike Carlisle back in 2020. The only losses have been, he lost to Brendan Loughnane in the Contender Series. Lost to Ricardo Lamas by unanimous decision right after that. Sticks around. Beats Spike Carlisle by unanimous decision. Then loses to Ricardo Ramos. And ultimately, what breaks up this winning streak that started in January 2022 was a loss to Andre Touchy-Fili by split decision in a fight where he outstruck Fili 81-59. And I remember, I recall disagreeing with that decision, but it might have been because I had money on Algeo. The wins against Joanderson Brito by unanimous decision. A second-round knockout against Herbert Burns. A second-round rear-naked choke against TJ Brown. And a unanimous decision victory against Alexander the Great Hernandez, outstriking him 110-75 with a knockdown October of 2023. I think that, Kyle Nelson, he's bought himself plenty of time by going on this 2-fight winning streak. And I don't necessarily know how I think this one plays out method of victory-wise, but I do think, ultimately, how does it shake out Kyle Nelson?
Don't do this. You cannot do this,
It's been a nice little winning streak, but Bill Algeo has been on a very impressive run since January of 2022. And, the thorough workings of TJ Brown and Alexander Hernandez, I think it shows that he's just on, half a level up or half a tier up than Kyle Nelson. Algeo wins this fight 75 times out of 100. I don't like a straight-up moneyline bet here. If Nelson was plus, 300, maybe. But Algeo, inside the distance, plus 215. It's been a while for Nelson since he's gotten finished, but I think Algeo is the opponent to do it. So Algeo inside the distance one way or another, plus 215. And I don't know, if I'm going Kyle Nelson, I probably just think that, like, he slows the fight just down a little bit. I just don't see many paths to victory for Kyle Nelson is the problem. But if I was going Kyle Nelson, I guess I'd go Nelson by decision, plus 300. Next up, we got 4 fights left. It's a middleweight matchup between Nursultan Ruzibov and Cedricus Dumas. Dumas is the plus 180 underdog. I think that's been on the way down. He might have started off like plus 200. And Ruzibov minus 218. Let's start with Cedricus Dumas. It's so crazy, and I'm so mad about it because, like, Cedricus Dumas somehow, on not awesome optics at all, has ended up winning 3 of 4 fights at the UFC level, including the Contender Series. His only loss has been a Josh Friend by second-round guillotine March of last year. He did fight 3 times in 2023. You love to see it. He won on the Contender Series with a guillotine over Matej Penez. Then he's on a 2-fight winning streak now. Against Cody Brundage, he landed 17 strikes. That was all it took without a takedown to beat Cody Brundage, who only landed 3 strikes over the course of 3 rounds.
But I'm not impressed by your performance, and I look forward to...
And you just look at that performance against Brundage, and it's like, Abu Azaitar, I know that, it hasn't... I just don't... I liked Abu Azaitar in that one, and I even recall thinking that Abu Azaitar got robbed against Cedricus Dumas. I think that was the case. That was the sentiment. October of 2023 at UFC 294. But Azaitar outstruck him 41-34, 2 takedowns to 1. Dumas got the unanimous decision. So I thought he lost that last one. That is important. But then you look at Ruzibov. He is fighting out of Uzbekistan, I do believe. I don't want to get that country wrong. Yep, Uzbekistan. He is 33-8-2 as a professional, 30 years old, 20 wins by submission. And, came in through organizations that I'm not overly familiar with. At least his opponents had double-digit wins. He fought Ibrahim Amane. That name sounds, pretty familiar back in Brave CF in 2021. This dude hasn't lost professionally in MMA since December of 2019. This is the problem. And won his UFC debut, against Bruno Ferreira with a first-round knockout. Let's see here. By the way, born in 1993. He is 2 years younger or older and will be at a 3-inch reach disadvantage. But he got that win early against Bruno Ferreira by first-round knockout at UFC Fight Night Strickland versus Magomedov. Bruno Ferreira, a guy that has been, really solid in the UFC. It's a meaningful win for Nursultan. I know that there are people out there that like Cedricus Dumas as the underdog, and what the hell, man? At this point, probably. It seems like he's mostly won. He escaped by the skin of his teeth against Abu Azaitar. He only, in one of the most underwhelming performances I've ever seen, got that win against Cody Brundage. So I just cannot be confident in Cedricus Dumas yet. So plus 180 as the underdog, I'm not a fan of it. I think Nursultan wins this fight like 80 times out of 100. I still have to say that, and I think he'll be popular in DFS. Minus 218, that's comfortable enough. And Nursultan by submission plus 140. Nursultan inside the distance minus 165. I love both of those numbers. Hit him upside the head. Yeah, I just cannot find myself going with Cedricus Dumas yet based on what I've seen in the UFC. Next up, a middleweight matchup between Chris Weidman and Bruno Silva. Weidman, the plus 195 underdog. Bruno Silva, the minus 238 favorite. Let's just get this out of the way. Let's start with Chris Weidman. I can get past the fact that you've lost 4 of your last 5 when those losses have been to Jacare Souza, Dominic Reyes, Uriah Hall, and Brad Tavares. And you were born in 1984, approaching the age of 40. With a win against Amari Akhmedov, granted, August of 2020, in a fight that was close and non-statistically overwhelming. Chris Weidman out-wrestled his way to that win. The problem is that goes all the way back to November of 2018. His last win was almost 4 years ago. He fought once in 2023, and his leg was just destroyed against Brad Tavares after being destroyed literally against Uriah Hall with that brutal, disgusting injury that happened very early. And that was hard to see. So he's only had the one fight, and it didn't go well. Brad Tavares, credit to him for being able to make it look so close.
But I'm not impressed by your performance, and I look forward to...
People like Chris Weidman, people don't want to see him hurt. You hammer this... it was the smart strategic decision. Hammer against the guy's legs who just broke his leg the last fight, multiple years ago on his way, making a comeback. It's about getting that win. But Bruno Silva, Weidman's opponent, the MMA math doesn't work here. Or maybe it does. Maybe it does overwhelmingly. Bruno Silva started his UFC career with 3 straight wins, all in 2021, with 3 straight knockouts, including a win over Andrew Sanchez. Well, I'm naming them all: Wellington Turman, Andrew Sanchez, and Jordan Wright, because that's 3 recognizable names. Then lost 2 straight to Alex Pereira. Understandable. That guy's good. Lost by rear naked by guillotine to Gerald Mearshart, August of 2022. His last win is April of last year, a first-round knockout against Brad Tavares. He's now lost 2 in a row against Brendan Allen and Shara Magomedov. That last one by unanimous decision. Why? This one is depressing because it's almost like, you hope you're wrong, but I'm very, very confident in this one. Chris Weidman.
Don't do this. You cannot do this,
I get maybe trying to go out on a win. I just don't think that this is the one where it's going to happen for. And it's going to be harder and harder to go out on a win with each fight that you take as you're approaching 40, with a leg that has had to recover significantly over your last 2 fights. I think this one is almost too easy to call. Bruno Silva's won all his fights in the UFC by knockout. Chris Weidman is a very, he's been around a long time. He hasn't been able to fight much over the last, 5-6 years. And Bruno Silva, I think, wins this fight by knockout. That's minus 120, hit it all day. I think Silva should be popular in DFS. I'm willing to pay that price, whatever it might be, because I think Silva wins this fight 90 times out of 100, and I think all by knockout. It's a weird matchup to give Chris Weidman given the circumstances. There we go. We are now to the main event of the evening. It is a welterweight matchup between Vicente Luque, who is the minus 112 favorite, against Joaquin Buckley, the minus 108 underdog. Let's start off with Vicente Luque. Winner of 5 of his last 7 fights, dating back to the Nico Price win, May of 2020. Finished those 4 fights in a row that he won against Nico, Randy Brown, Tyron Woodley, and Michael Chiesa. Those were all finishes, including 2 Darce chokes. Then lost 2 fights in a row to Belal Muhammad, who, and Jeff Neal. And got beat up pretty bad by Jeff Neal and finished in the 3rd round. I think Jeff Neal is, in the kind of fight that ended up being, it was perfectly made for Jeff Neal. Just throwing heavy hands. I think that, that naturally, that is where his strengths lie. And Belal Muhammad, he wasn't able to land as many strikes as Luque, but, was able to ride the 5 takedowns. And it's impressive that Belal Muhammad is able to do that so easily to a guy like Luque. I know that people hate Bilal Muhammad, but you got to give credit to the winning streak that he has been on. Luque is coming off of a win against Rafael dos Anjos August of last year.
Break out the red panties.
Outstriking RDA 72-66, taking him down 8 times to 2. Joaquin Buckley, born in 1994, he's 3 years younger and will have a 1-inch reach advantage. New Mansa is the moniker. Winner of 5 of his last 7 fights dating back to September of 2021. And you might recall back in October of 2020, he landed one of the greatest knockouts of all time with that spinning back kick with his foot suspended in air against Impa Kasanganay. Kasanganay goes on to, be the PFL champion. What a world. Wins 2 against Abdul Razak Al Hassan by split decision, outstriking him 51-46, 5 takedowns to 3. Gets the second round knockout over Albert Duraev, and then is on a 2-fight winning streak with a knockout over Andre Fiallo and a unanimous decision victory over Alex Morono. The 2 losses in between then, in between the Duraev fight and the Fiallo win, hard to blame him for these two. He lost a unanimous decision to Nasruddin Imavov in what was statistically a pretty close fight, and he gets knocked out in the second round by Chris Curtis. Finished with some brutal ground and pound there where, Chris Curtis was saying, go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep. Check that press conference. I know people like Buckley in this one. And I do think that Buckley, especially over these last 2 fights, has shown improvement. But, Morono is probably the best win of his UFC career, just name and quality-wise. Although, it might be Impa Kasanganay now, even though that was 4 years ago. I do think that Buckley is coming into his own a little bit more. It turns out the Andre Fiallo win doesn't mean a whole lot. We know that Buckley has, so far struggled against that top 15 competition that he's been exposed to. Now, that was at middleweight, I do believe. And it's now that he's been down at welterweight that he's, looked fantastic. I'm just not... this is the problem with Buckley, is I do think that he, can get takedowns, 1 or 2 in any given fight. I just think that Luque is still, right now, I think it's just a little bit too early. I think if Buckley was coming off another win and you saw even more improvement, then you'd say, okay, I think now he's ready for Vicente Luque. I love Joaquin Buckley, and I have to say, I might even be rooting for him in this one because it'd be very interesting if he is able to get this win. And, we saw from RDA's last fight, man, that, RDA might be old, but he is still a very legitimate victory to have. Even at this age, he's still, very sharp. I hate talking about him like he's a geriatric, but that's the case. RDA still looks good. So, Luque, I think, is going to be able to match Buckley on the feet. And, I think that he's going to want to try to, maybe avoid some of that if he can, but I think his hard shots are going to land hard, and I think Buckley's going to have his moments too in the kickboxing department. But I think if this turns into a mixed martial arts fight, I think that Luque is the more well-versed to win. And I could see it happening in a bunch of different ways. The strongest individual prop might actually be Buckley, I don't know, by decision. I think that it took, just raw power from Jeff Neal to be able to put Luque away. I think Buckley, if you think he wins this fight, I think he keeps off of his back and he just, lands the greater volume of shots on the feet than Vicente Luque does. Buckley by decision is plus 320. I think Luque does win this fight 60 times out of 100. So Luque minus 112, that's probably the one I'm going to be rolling with. This is a really interesting fight, too. And Luque, method of victory-wise, I'm kind of split between by decision plus 500 or just inside the distance plus 150. That's probably the one to go with. But I'm less confident in method of victory when it comes to Vicente Luque here. And now we are to the main event of the evening.
Break out the red panties.
It is a women's flyweight matchup between Erin Blanchfield, who is currently ranked number 4 in the world at flyweight according to Tapology.com, and Manon Furio, who is currently ranked number 3, 11-1 as a professional. Fierro is the plus 160 underdog. Blanchfield, the minus 192 favorite. I love Manon Furio, and both of these fighters, this is going to be, I believe this is a title eliminator, quote unquote. Obviously always skeptical of that terminology, the way it's played out over the years. But Erin Blanchfield has not lost in the UFC. She has only lost once in her professional career, and that was against Tracy Cortez back in Invicta by split decision in 2019. Wins in the UFC over Sarah Alpar, Miranda Maverick, who she took down 7 times, J.J. Aldridge, who she finished in the second round, Kimura Molly McCann, rear naked choke Jessica Andrade, and is coming off a unanimous decision victory over Tyler Santos, outstriking her 61-55. Born in 1999 with a 66-inch reach, Fierro, the Beast out of France, she'll be at a 1-inch reach disadvantage. She was born in 1990. In the UFC, and, as far as Fierro's only professional loss, that dates back to Leah McCourt in Cage Warriors by split decision. So both of their losses came years ago and to high-level competition for the weight classes. I love to see it. Fierro beat Victoria Leonardo with a second-round knockout. Tabitha Ritchie by second-round knockout. Then it's been 4 straight unanimous decisions against Mayra Buenos Silva, who she outstruck 91-48. She outstruck Jennifer Maia 83-37. She did try to wrestle with her a little bit, and that was some of the moments where she didn't look as good in that fight. Caitlin Chukagian, now Caitlin Sermonara, outstruck her 98-76 with a takedown, and is coming off a unanimous decision victory over Rose Namajunas September of 2023 in what was a close statistical fight, but I think was pretty decisively 29-28. One judge did have it 30-27. Blanchfield, young, cold-blooded, as is the nickname, on a very impressive winning streak, but I think that everything's said about this one. You factor in that Blanchfield is younger and on the way up, but you don't know if she's reached her real peak yet at this level. Fierro, a little bit older, and, now has just, I think, a higher quality of UFC experience. You're telling me your last 4 wins are MBS, Jennifer Maia, Caitlin Sermonara, formerly Chukagian, and Rose Namajunas? Especially after Rose, coming off the win that she just had this past week, where, it wasn't overly impressive, but it was another win against a ranked UFC opponent. I believe ranked. So, honestly, how do I see the fight playing out is the important part. Blanchfield, I don't think she's going to take her down 7 times. She hasn't done that any other fight in the UFC. She hasn't necessarily had to. Manon Furio is going to have to watch out, for the submission game of Erin Blanchfield. So that's where Blanchfield's going to be looking to take it. You got to think she's going to be capable and competent in the striking department, but that's just going to be where Furio is going to, have the by far the greatest advantage. She landed between 83 and 98 strikes across those 4 fights against Tabitha Ritchie and Caitlin Sermonara. Her level of competition has only grown. She hasn't looked perfect, but she continues to get decisive victories. I think this is a 50-50 fight. I think that this is still a time period where, this is where Manon Furio wants to catch Erin Blanchfield. It's still early and coming off the biggest win of her career. So I think this is a 50-50 matchup. Manon Furio.
Nick, one comment, man. One comment.
No, don't be scared, homie. Come on.
Don't be scared of the height. I know a lot of people are on Blanchfield this week, but I'm on Manon Furio plus 160. Hit it. I'm going to say Manon Furio, I'm going to say that she wins this by decision is most likely. I think that she is both of these fighters are very, very much worth a look in DFS regardless of the price. And I think they'll both be rather expensive, like in the $17 to $23, $17 to like $21 range, I think is most realistic. Fierro by decision plus 350. Fierro by TKO knockout plus 425. If I'm going Blanchfield, I'm going either by decision, but I think that's a little less likely, because if these fights are starting on the feet and it's going 5 rounds, I think it will continuously have. I just don't think that that's a fight that Aaron Blanchfield wins more times than not on the judges' scorecards, as opposed to by submission plus 180, which I think is a fantastic number. I know people are unhappy about all the fight nights in between UFC 299 and UFC 300, but I am really, really looking forward to this women's flyweight main event at UFC Atlantic City. And folks, that is it for episode 130 of RotoBallers' official MMA podcast. Tap that. Follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady for all my picks on major MMA events, regional events, UFC Fight Pass events, major boxing matches. Follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on YouTube, Facebook, and Spotify. I'll be in the RotoBaller MMA Discord from 5 p.m. and onward on Saturday. Come on in. Let's talk about UFC Atlantic City. Let's talk about the card as it's going down and beforehand. I've had a lot of guests on this week from BYB Bare Knuckle Boxing. Another one will be dropping on either Sunday or Monday with Shelby Boom Boom Cannon. The spring football season is here. Check out my UFL content that's going to be coming out starting this weekend. Folks, thank you so much for listening. Enjoy all of the sports that we got going on. The Sweet 16 is going on as I speak. Baseball opening day was here. This one belongs to the Reds. Have yourself a great weekend and peace.